Good evening and welcome to Perspective. This is a program about people. Several months ago, I was pleased to have Eddie Kozak, a man in his music, on this program. But tonight we're going to have another Kozak, Eddie Kozak Sr., the man years ago who was known as the man with the Kozak tone. Thanks for coming on to the program, Mr. Kozak.
Okay.
Mr. Kozak, when did you start into music?
I was 11 years old when my father, and you'll understand, my father was a very fine cornet soloist. In 1910, he was recognized as one of the 10 best cornetists in America, according to a musical called the Contrute. And my father presented me with a gold-plated cornet. And he says, "Here, son, I want you to learn to play cornet." I was 11. He says, "I want you to sing on the trumpet. Don't play notes, but sing, and don't let them know where you take a breath."
One of the secrets of good playing.
That's right, because in order to be a good trumpet player, you have to be a lyricist. You see, my father hated a trumpet. He loved cornet. And he had, as a companion, Bomir Krill, the famous cornet soloist. He was a hater of trumpet. But the difference in a trumpet and a cornet is that a cornet is a smaller bore, the mouthpipe with the mouthpiece. That's right.
I see.
And the trumpet is a larger bore. And of course, the trumpets run in small bore, medium large, and large bore. They're all little different bores. But the trumpet is for brilliance, where a cornet has a mellow tone. Here, some years back, I went to the Civic Theater, and they had that famous Air Force band, you know, that carries the Glee Club. That's beautiful. They had 8 in the trumpet section. The first 6 played cornet, and the last 2 played trumpet. But they relish that tonal quality. A cornet has a beautiful tone. There's no getting away from it. But of course, today, there's a confusion. A cornet and a trumpet is the same fingering.
I see.
Same finger whatsoever. It plays the same, only you get a more mellow tone on the cornet.
How old should a child be to be able to start playing trumpet?
Well, I had one here. I had an awful lot of students, and I came here in 1965, and I had one here that was 8 years old. But about 9, 10 years old, they can start on cornet or trumpet. The idea is they have to get the right start. They must realize that they have to breathe deep and use their diaphragm. In the school system, they don't even talk about the diaphragm. That controls the quality of air that passes through those vibrations of the lips. Tone is not air, Walter. It's not air. It's the vibration of the lips that creates the tone.
The secret then is in the lips.
That's right. And what's important is the left hand. That left hand lifts and lowers that trumpet to compensate for what you're looking for. For instance, when I traveled with Bomir Krill, I was but 19 years old, and I was his solo cornet player. And he took an interest in me, and he took me under his wing, and he showed me how to play cornet, to play what they call pedal notes. Now, pedal notes are below the range of the trumpet. And he is the only man that ever played pedal notes correctly. Even today, nobody's ever dared to try to beat him. He played a record for the Victor people called Carnival of Venice, where he takes the lead down in the pedal note, right. Boom, 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 and they be, and he was marvelous, marvelous. He was a sensational cornetist, and that made such an impression on me that I never tried to play the way they do here with that little slide that they push out to get the low notes. See? I play him without the slide, and I made a tape that I call a resume of my career as a trumpet player, and from beginning to end, I go all through that tape, all the necessary things. But in the present day, they don't teach a lot of those things because they don't consider it necessary. See? Now, for instance, I preach what they call the no-pressure system. That's a wonderful thing. But when you get to take a breath, you release the pressure of that mouthpiece. You don't take the mouthpiece off the lips. You keep it there. And then you take that breath and that gives you renewed power of that mouthpiece. I was outstanding in endurance in Chicago. I would endure and go to extremes where other trumpet players would break down. They couldn't take it. You know what I mean?
Just before we get into Chicago, let's roll that tape right now and pick up a few seconds on one of your recordings. Go ahead and roll the tape. Okay, that sounded beautiful to me.
Well, yeah, it's the beauty of it, Walter, is what we call the vibrato.
Mm-hmm.
Now, a vibrato is you shake the fingers over the valves to create, instead of having a smooth tone, doo,
right.
You go doo.
I hear you.
That's what creates the style. That's what I built my reputation on, because I had a beautiful vibrato, and that's what sold it. Because people hear that and they sounds like singing.
Sure.
I remember my father says, don't play notes, sing them.
Sing them. Let's go back to Chicago again, Mr. Kozak, and let's talk about the Palace Theater.
Well, the Palace Theater was a wonderful reputation I have. It was a beautiful house. It was a two-a-day house. That meant there was a show there at 2 o'clock and another show at 8 o'clock.
Right.
It was all reserved seats, and society held those seats. You could hardly buy a seat on the main floor. You could get on the balcony, but the main floor seats was practically society. Every day that I walked into that pit to sit down in my chair, I knew who was going to sit alongside of me. Either a doctor or a lawyer, a businessman, and they were there continually. Every day on that particular day, they would be there. And we played musicals like 8 acts of vaudeville. It was the Orpheum Circuit. Do you remember the Orpheum Circuit?
Sure.
There was 2 circuits. There was the Orpheum Circuit that played a big theater in every town, and there was the Orpheum Junior that played the sticks. What I mean is the one-horse towns, you know.
Right, the outlying districts.
So the Orpheum played the Palace Theater. We were a sister ship to the New York Palace. We played the same performance. And under the circumstances, we had 2 hours on a Sunday morning to rehearse 8 acts. But you couldn't go through all those acts. That's ridiculous. So we only played there for tempo, whatever tempo they required. You understand?
Sure.
What they needed. And that was what solved the situation. And we played acts like Bob Hope, who had a stooge up on the balcony or up in the box that used to kid him. We played a quartet called the Paul Whiteman Quartet, where a young fella sang with him, and that was Bing Crosby. That's where he got his start. I played for Milton Berle, for George Jessel, for every star. Sophie Tucker, the great performer. But here's a story I wish to tell.
Go ahead.
There was a garden in Chicago, a cabaret called Rainbow Garden. They had a wonderful orchestra in there called the, I forget the name of it now, but Isham Jones. Isham Jones played. And they had a line of girls, and a fellow by the name of Ed Beck was the producer. He was a good friend of mine. And a hood, or a racketeer, or what would you call it?
A hood.
A hood. He came in and he fell in love with one of the girls, and her name was Ruth Edding. And he twisted the arm of the producer and let him have that girl come out in front of the band and sing in front of the chorus. And that was Ruth Ettinger. She sang a number called 10 Cents a Dance, da-dee-dee-dee-dee, da-dee-dee-dee-dee. Now, he again twisted the Victor people, record people, and they made a record of her. So they finally built her into the Palace Theater, which was the super house in Chicago. So they came in, and his name was Gimp Snyder. He was a gangster if there ever was a gangster. Okay? Now, Gimp come into the theater with his girlfriend, Ruth Etting, and she got on the stage and started to sing. And when we got into the verse, before we got to the chorus, I was playing and I heard a commotion. Gimp was backstage and he grabbed his .45 and he rushed down in the basement. And the stagehands after him. And they grabbed him at the pit door, the door that led up to the pit, because he was going to shoot me. He says, trumpet's got no right to play there. Okay? So they grabbed him, they pulled him back, and then after the act was over, they asked for me to hand the book down of Ruth Etting's act.
Yes.
So I did. And they looked in there where I wasn't supposed to play. I was, because the arranger forgot to write tacit, T-A-C-I-T, which means don't play.
Wait, rest.
Understand? Yes. So when I come out of the pit after the show was over, he wanted to kiss me. He was a gangster. But Hollywood made the picture, Hollywood, called Love Me or Leave Me.
Yes.
And they made it wrong, because at the end of the picture, it shows him standing in front of a nightclub and she's back there singing.
Right.
I actually remember he died in prison because he shot her piano player for falling in love with her.
That shows there's danger in being a musician. All right, this looks like a good place to take our break. Stay with us. We'll be back in 2 minutes.